the cemetery dates back to the 80s. So we were getting a lot
of the 80s, like the 1980s.
Yeah.
Way back.
Way back to the 1980s. Wait a minute. 1880s or 1980s?
I have to double check that.
All right, we're gonna go now, Jacob. You're out.
Well, the reason I say that is
old cemetery from the 1980s.
Hold up.
Welcome to the Scary Spirits Podcast. Please be advised that the presenters may use adult language and/or discuss adult situations. This podcast is not intended for younger listeners or those that may be easily offended. So, if you're ready, let's go.
Hi, I'm Greg.
Hey, I'm Karen.
And welcome to the Scary Spirits Podcast presents Wicked Ramblings, an entertainment podcast that strives to answer the twisted questions currently burning a bright hole in your dark soul.
What could possibly go wrong?
Indeed. How are you, Karen?
I'm excited. This is going to be fun. How are you, Greg?
I'm good, Karen. Thanks for asking.
It's what we do.
So this is our inaugural episode of Wicked Ramblings. Is it not, Karen?
It is.
So what topic have, I guess, you chosen for us to go over today?
Today's adventure takes us into the fascinating world of hunting of ghosts, hauntings, and unexplained paranormal happenings. We'll cover some do's and don'ts, what equipment you might need, and hopefully a few personal experiences. If you've ever considered going on a ghost hunt, this podcast is for you.
Excellent, Karen.
Thank you.
And who is our guest of honor today, Karen?
I'm so excited. Our guest of honor is Jacob Hudson. Look at him. Doesn't he have those handsome Hudson jeans?
Our listeners can't see him, Karen.
Trust me, he has them. And he's smart too. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He grew up in Denver, Colorado, and has had an interest in ghost hunting and the paranormal from a young age. Along with a group of friends, Jacob has been on multiple hunts across Colorado, ranging from the ghost town of St. Elmo to the Mackey building of CU Boulder. Throughout these experiences, Jacob has learned about the processes involved in having fun and successful time in the field and is here to discuss a few things that he has learned along the way. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, how's it going? I'm excited to be here.
Well, that's good news. That's a good start.
Yes. Thanks for joining us. We're recording this earlier in the day than we usually do. So it's morning where you are, correct?
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. here.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just excited to come on and discuss ghost hunting anytime, morning or evening.
Morning, noon, or night.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm just going to start. We're going to start with some questions and ask you what you think. And I'm curious to know what first sparked your interest in ghost hunting. Was there a specific event?
I think what first sparked my interest was when I started, I fell in love with ghost hunting TV shows as a young kid. And I would also say probably falling in love with horror movies. Probably way too young, but just a general interest in the paranormal from a pretty young age from ghost hunting shows and horror movies.
Good parenting.
Right.
Good parenting, exactly. Bill and Kristen. Way to go. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
It wasn't Scooby-Doo or something.
Yeah, I think it was what they were hoping I was watching.
Yes.
But
so what were you watching? Which shows did you watch, or do you have favorites?
Yeah, Ghost Hunters was the first one, and Ghost Adventures is probably the most prevalent. There's, and I'm sure we'll get into discussing those different, it can get controversial when it comes to ghost hunting TV shows, but I do really like Ghost Adventures. I think Zach Bagans does as good of a job as he can, trying to be as unbiased with the evidence. But I think that a lot of the times you could see the Hollywood influence that he has to have in his show, right? Yeah. But I think you have to take a lot with a grain of salt, but I think that was a good place to start in understanding it.
Yeah.
So I don't watch them, but Greg, you do. Do you have a favorite one?
I've been watching the Destination Fear. I like that one.
Mhm.
The newer
That's a good one as well. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was just watching Ghost Adventures. They were having a marathon on the other day, and I was watching it. We don't have Discovery Plus or whatever it is. It's
Yeah,
on now,
exactly.
so they're all just reruns
Mhm.
for now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think they do a better job than people give them credit for on Ghost Adventures, and it's they found some very interesting evidence. But like I said, I think you have to take a lot of it with a grain of salt, because I think they have to pack enough into each episode, right?
Yeah. There's nothing worse than
Yeah.
hunting a ghost and finding nothing.
Exactly. You just
There's
can't
no
put that-
entertainment value in that.
Exactly. I don't think Discovery's putting that one on.
Do you think they ever have that happen and they just scrap it, or do you think they always find something?
It's crazy, because the level that they are doing things on is so much higher than what everyone else is doing, because they just have the most funding out of anyone. I mean, Zach Bagans is by far the most funded ghost hunter in the world. His whole crew, I mean, they pull up with like 3 semis worth of equipment, because they pretty much will spend 2 or 3 days on one site at a time. So I really don't know. I would assume they've probably scrapped a few episodes, because the way they do it is very different from typical ghost hunting, because what most ghost hunting, I think, revolves around at a lower level is finding a place that you can go back to multiple times and, recreating the same experiments multiple times.
Yeah, I would think it wouldn't be hard to experience something, even if you could debunk it, and you can still air that as being
exactly.
debunked.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could hear, and I'm sure everyone has been watching Ghost Adventures and heard him say, "Oh, listen to this EVP," and you're like, "Wow, I really don't understand what that EVP is saying,"
All right. Well, that brings up 2 questions on my part. So, as a scientist, when you go into a place like that, and you kind of mentioned it, you want to go back multiple times, because my question is, what's your control? You go into a building or into a ghost hunt or whatever, and you get readings, and we'll talk about equipment in a minute, but you get these readings. Well, how do you know those aren't just normal readings in the house? So you said
that's Dr. Karen coming out.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you
for sure.
you want to go, but you already mentioned it, Jacob. You want to go back, right? Multiple
Yeah, for
times
sure.
to the same place to kind of get those control readings, and then see if anything more spectacular than that happens. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the misconception that you get when you watch those ghost hunting TV shows versus what people are actually doing in the field, right? That's kind of the Hollywood aspect, that you can just show up. You can be like, "Oh, look at this. We've got these crazy recordings, and, we're here for one night." But, the best way to do it is to have multiple days at a location that you're suspicious is haunted. And I think a lot of what setting up control has to do somewhat with funding, because a lot of what they're doing to establish what the control is setting up cameras all over the house and letting them record for days on end, letting audio recordings goes for days on or nights on end, I guess, but just being able to have that sort of control, and then trying to find what's different, what's out of the ordinary, I guess is the best way to put it. But you don't really see that on Ghost Adventures. The main one I think about is called the Stanley Method, is the best way I've seen people establish a control, which is it was invented at the Stanley Hotel. What they do is they put on noise canceling headphones. They use what they call an SB7 spirit box, and they'll ask questions, but the person with the headphone, there'll be one person with a headphone with their headphones on with their device. I guess I'm sorry, I think I'm going on a rant. I think we probably want to discuss that when we do the when we're talking about what the actual devices are doing.
They that Amy and what's his name? What's their show called? She used to be on Ghost Hunters.
Oh,
Amy Brunny, and what's the other dude name? Their show, they use that a lot. Where one of them has noise canceling headphones, and the other one is asking questions and from another room even.
No, exactly. And that's why I'm thinking that's the best way I've seen people establish a control, just because you can't hear anything in the room when you have the noise canceling headphones on.
Okay, cool. But that's all the Hollywood stuff, right? That's if you've got grants and funding and all that kind of thing. So
it can be problematic. Yeah.
When we get down to the little guy.
Kindred Spirits. That's what it's called.
Kindred Spirit. Oh, that's a good title. I like that.
Yeah.
So what's the first piece of equipment you bought?
So the first piece of equipment that I've gotten was the SB7 spirit box.
Okay. And can you describe what that is and what it does?
Yes. So an SB7 spirit box, I actually have it right here. I could show it to you guys. Oh, I guess it's a listening.
I want to
Just
That's
see
for the
okay,
it.
but I
listeners,
want to see it.
Yeah, but it's
I'll describe it in
yeah.
detail.
So
It's a
an
black box.
Yeah, it's a radio essentially. You can scan through the radio station, so it won't just be sitting on a singular radio station. You turn the device on, and it'll scan through these radio stations. And the theory behind it is that whatever entities you're speaking with are able to manipulate the radio waves, and you can hear things through the scanning of the radio waves over multiple. Since it's sweeping through the radio stations,
Will it stop if it hears something?
No, so what'll happen is during scanning over, what they find and think is paranormal is when you scan over multiple radio stations, but you're getting a full sentence, right?
In the same voice.
Yes, in the same
Interesting.
voice. So you'll be going from 95.7 to 107.5, right? And you'll have a voice that is the similar and speaking in a coherent sentence over the scan of 10, radio stations.
Okay, why did you pick that as your first piece of equipment? Because of Ghost Adventures?
Yes, it's one of the most common things they use on there. And you start getting into it, and like EVP recorders and spirit boxes are probably the most commonly used tools in ghost hunting, just because they're so cheap and widely available.
Okay, speaking of which, how much, if you don't mind, or you don't have to say how much yours was, but what in general how much does a spirit box run?
I would say probably around $60 for a spirit box and a speaker that goes with it.
Cool. And where do you find such a thing? Are there websites?
Yeah, if you Google it, there's a couple websites. You can even get them off Amazon now. It depends on how much you want to go into like brand names and stuff, but you can get a spirit box pretty cheap on Amazon.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned another piece of equipment, EVP. Is that what you said?
Yep, an EVP recorder is just a digital recorder. This is
It's another black box, people, with some buttons on it.
It's just a digital recorder. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it does.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can use it for dictation or anything, right?
I didn't know that.
That's what they're for. But
yeah. And it's
what
funny,
do you listen for? Do you listen for actual voices?
So what they call it, the EVP recorder is just the recording device. They call it an EVP recorder because an EVP is what they call a
I want to say electronic voice phenomenon or something.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Electronic voice phenomenon is when you ask a question, you'll be like, is there anybody here with us? Nobody will hear anything, but for some reason you get an interesting low raspy response a lot of the time on your digital recorders.
So you basically turn that on and leave it on.
Yes, that's your recording devices. You'll use your EVP recorder so an SB7 spirit box doesn't actually have a recording device in it. You'll use your EVP recorder to record your spirit box sessions. Everything you're doing through an EVP recorder and video camera recorders. I think most evidence is probably documented off of EVP recorders at the lower levels.
Okay. Greg, do you have one of those?
I do not.
Not yet?
No.
Okay. So how much are those?
Oh, they're pretty cheap as well. Probably about $20 for a recording device.
And how long do they record for? Till the batteries die, or?
Yeah, so that's actually you always need to bring extra batteries too, because that's one of the most common things in ghost hunting is your devices seem to run out of battery constantly. But the one I have can record up to 16 gigabytes of data.
Okay.
And I think it was 20. I think I want to say it was like 6 hours of audio or something like that. And then you can also, I think it's just the more space, the more expensive they are is really what it comes down to. But I think if you want to get one like that for $20, you'll probably get about 6 to 8 hours of recording on it.
Okay, awesome. Is that all the equipment you have, or do you have more?
I have a couple of friends who ghost hunt with me, and we all have a couple of pieces of equipment to ourselves.
Do you have a group name?
No, we don't. We're just a couple of friends.
Come on.
We really try to. It's hard,
Come on. I would think that knowing Jacob as my nephew, I would know that you would have a name. You must have tried.
We tried to make more of an official group, and it was just such a time commitment, and it was such a commitment that it ended up just kind of getting pushed to the side, unfortunately.
Oh, all right.
But
you should work on that.
One of these days we'll get there.
So how do you find your places to actually do your hunts? Do you contact the owners of these buildings or what?
Yeah, so a lot of these ghost hunts take place in more historical districts. You can find lists of haunted places in your state pretty easily available online. I think probably the most famous place we've been is St. Elmo, which is it's a ghost town in Colorado, an old mining town. And all we really had to do to get access to a couple of the buildings there was email the people at power there, because it's a historic district. So you just had to contact the historical society, get in contact with the right people. And typically those tourism towns are pretty open to letting people come in on a specific night and letting them do a ghost hunt, just because it's good for press.
Do they normally charge you?
No, we haven't been charged once. The one we've been trying to get access to, and I mean, been trying a couple years ago, we tried to get access to, is the Molly Brown house here. And they wanted to charge. So that was a little bit more difficult.
All right. So take us through, you get to the ghost town. All right. You're going in the building with your friends, because we're going to emphasize.
First of all, it's at night,
Yes.
Right?
Yes, night.
So why is it
Why
always
is
at
it
night?
always at night?
Yeah. Why?
So there's a lot of different theories on that. So a lot of people theorize that the more having lights on, having TVs on, it kind of interferes with paranormal activity. That's just theorized. And people will argue different things about that every day of the week. And then there's also more theories. There's a lot of spiritual belief that more paranormal activity is happening at night.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think it's also it's a lot easier. A lot of what you're catching visually is easier to catch on infrared cameras and night vision cameras, because the infrared and the full spectrum cameras is what you're catching your orbs on, which is the main visual evidence you're looking for on these ghost hunts. Don't quote me on this, but I do think it's a lot easier for those full spectrum cameras at night, just because I think the light interferes with them. But I'm not positive.
Any of your buddies have used K2 meters?
I don't think we have a K2 meter. We have EMF readers, but I don't think we have a K2 meter.
Okay.
All right. Now wait, you both have to explain what a K2 meter and an EMF meter are.
Well, he was saying that you want to do it when the electricity's off. So I imagine electricity would interfere with a EMF detector.
Yes, for sure. And even, some of those detectors you get, even just the energy coming from your body will even be messing with them if you put your hand
Greg,
over it.
you have so much energy in your body. You probably couldn't use one of those.
Exactly.
But what does EMF stand
Karen,
for?
I used one when we went to the Promont, Karen, for that little ghost thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
They gave us tools, and I used a K2.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
But what does it stand for, and what does it do?
So a K2, an EMF reader is an electromagnetic field reader. So it's just detecting the electromagnetic field, and people theorize that ghosts can manipulate the electromagnetic field, and that's kind of the experience you're having when people say that the temperature changed, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a temperature reader? Or is
no,
it...
so I also have a non-contact thermometer that we use to detect that as well, because the temperature drops are probably the most common thing you get in the spirit box sessions have been the most successful, and then the temperature fluctuation has been the most common thing that we see, I think.
Again, I would want to see a control on that.
That always becomes the problem. It becomes,
yeah. Okay, so but the EMF, does it have like the bars go up and down when it senses?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ones. A lot of them have lights on them that will a light with a meter. It'll have a light, and each light correlates to a higher level of electromagnetic field, right? So
so electricity would set that off a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So
because the lights were on in the Promont. We went on a ghost hunt.
I was able to trace the wiring in the walls with it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what
I mean? Yeah.
And even in the floor,
because Milford, Ohio, Jacob, has a paranormal society.
Oh, do they really?
Yes, they do. And they sponsored this kind of ghost hunt at do you think that's one of the oldest houses in the area still standing? I would say.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we went, I dragged Greg and his lovely wife there.
That sounds like a blast.
There were too many people though. And that's the thing.
There's
so many people, and it's just, it was neat to learn about the different types of equipment that you could use and stuff, but it wasn't
more
really
educational.
Yeah.
And she made me get smudged afterwards.
I did.
It's a great idea. I always recommend it.
We'll talk about that in a minute too.
For sure,
okay.
For sure.
So you and your buddies go into, you've got permission. Let's stress that you want permission.
That is definitely the point that should be stressed, because I know I'm not going to incriminate myself, but I've heard of people not getting permission properly.
People
and it
talk,
doesn't
you
go
hear
well.
things.
Yeah,
you
you
know?
hear things, and it doesn't go well when you don't get permission.
Okay. So we're going to say these two things often throughout this podcast: get permission and don't go alone.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're walking in the building. I'm assuming you have flashlights. Do you have like journals or something? Do you record anything on pen and paper, or is it all electronic now?
It's mostly all electronic. There are a lot of there's some methods people used to do where I guess like more in the Lorraine Warren and kind of the original days before technology was here, it was more so there were a lot of methods with people, psychics, writing down things that they're hearing and seeing, and then having translators kind of figure things out based on it. But in modern ghost hunting, people kind of look at that as not super legitimate just because it's so easy to hoax.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a spirit box, you have an EMF meter, you have a thermometer. Do you have a camera?
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys have cameras?
So yeah, I think if we're talking like what an essential kit looks like if you were to walk into a building and you're ready to go for a ghost hunt, I think like an EMF detector is very common, even though as we've discussed, like with control, it's kind of difficult to prove. But if you're in
is
the
there
moment
electricity in?
Yeah, sometimes you just have to be careful where you're using it. Not at St. Elmo's, there wasn't. Well, in the buildings we were in, there wasn't electricity, but there is in some of them. But you need to be careful with them. That should always be taken with a grain of salt for that reason, you know. So I think having your EVP recording devices, I think having an SB7 spirit box and speaker is great because as a beginner, I think those two tools are the most likely to help you catch any actual, to actually catch evidence. Flashlights, having a no contact thermometer, which again, issues with control, but being able to track those fluctuations in the temperature. And then a full spectrum camera is probably the most expensive part of the thing. I think they run about $250, but that's when you're seeing the orbs and everything. They're catching on all spectrum and infrared cameras.
So it's a digital record. It's not a picture. Is it like you're filming?
No, it's a recording. Yeah, it's an actual video camera. If you have all of those things, that's probably the essentials you would want to go into a ghost hunt. The problem is with visual evidence is just the more visual evidence you want to collect, the more expensive it gets. I think the audio evidence is probably the more beginning, but you can get a full spectrum camera for about $250, I think.
That's cheaper than I thought.
Yeah, they used to be way more expensive, but I think with technology just getting more advanced, I think they're just a little bit more widely available.
So you set up in one room with all this equipment, and then do you just get a sleeping bag and hang out, or what do you do?
So there's different processes.
Do you walk in and talk, or?
So we like to do different experiments. The favorite is definitely the spirit box session with the noise canceling headphones. So what you'll do is on these spirit boxes, you can connect either your speaker or headphones. We'll connect the spirit box to noise canceling headphones. And this is called the Stanley Method. It was invented at the Stanley Hotel. But what you'll do is you'll put on your noise canceling headphones, you'll get a spirit box, and you'll have people in the room asking questions that don't have the headphones on, right? So the person with the noise canceling headphones can't hear any of the questions, and they'll just be listening to the spirit box.
So they're listening for the answers.
Yes. And so they'll just randomly, whenever they hear something come through, say, I heard it say John, I heard it say someone.
No, crap, that would creep me out. I wouldn't like that.
It's intimidating. It really is intimidating your first time doing it, but it's it's a weird sense of no control, not being able to hear anything but just ghosts, but just what you're listening for, right? That's our starting method. There's a lot of things. You do EVP sessions, which are just you use your EVP recorder, and you'll just say, hey, is there anybody here with us? And we always try to start asking questions based on the history of the place. So like, in St. Elmo's, it was a mining town. So we're always like, were you working in the mines? How long were you here for? When did you get here? Kind of stuff of that essence. And that's, some of these buildings we've been in are pretty big, but that would be the main starting point for an investigation for collecting audio evidence.
I have to tell you, because we went to, what's it actually called?
Ohio State Reformatory.
The Reformatory.
Oh, yeah.
For the Ohio Haunters.
Mm-hmm.
And we signed up for the ghost hunt, and we get there, and the first thing they say is, you better have not been drinking. We all went, oh crap. That was our first mistake.
Oops.
It was
I would have said,
midnight.
no, I have
we got
not.
in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're thinking they're going to give us equipment or something, tools to, and it's a big place. You should come up. We've talked about it before. Getting
Yeah, this was it was a group haunt. I mean, there was how many people do you think there were, Karen? 30, 40, 50?
I was going to say 50. Yeah, something
but
like
it's
that.
so large that you felt like you were alone the whole time.
Yeah, you could go.
Oh, really?
You would run into
that would be
others.
that would be so cool.
So we walked in and they basically took your license. And then we thought, okay, they're going to give us equipment, but no, they just wanted to make sure you left. And they said, okay, just be out by 3, have fun.
Oh,
and
really?
We stood there like, oh crap.
It's funny. Yeah.
So we had nothing. We had
They
no
said, go
equipment.
wherever you want, except if there's something chained off, you can't go.
Yes,
but anywhere
that's
else
important.
is free range.
That is crazy.
Go wherever you want is a very important part of the story.
Exactly. That's so funny. That it's funny when we went to St. Elmo's, it was kind of similar where it's just they had 3 buildings we were allowed to go in, and then there was a path up to where the old mines used to be. And you couldn't make it all the way up to the parts of the mine, but it was chained off. So basically the people showed up who allowed us to do the ghost hunt, and they were just like, well, here's the 3 buildings, unlocked the gate over to the mine area and said, okay, have fun.
Wow, that's cool.
I couldn't believe it was that easy.
Yeah, so we didn't have anything, but Mariah, well, I've never had a paranormal experience personally. Greg and Mariah said they felt something. You want to explain what happened when you were?
No, we didn't see anything, but we were walking up these stairs, go to one of these rooms that Mariah led us to.
Mariah took us to every single corner. Who did the ghost hunt on that place? Which show did it, Greg? You said.
Oh, I think they've all been there.
Well, the one, and they said, we're going into this really especially creepy place. And Greg said,
in the basement,
been in there.
Yeah.
Mariah took me there. Mariah we were squeezing up these tiny little circular stairs. I'm like, where are we going? She said, we can go anywhere if it's not blocked off. This isn't blocked off. Let's go. So she took us, Mariah. Mariah's
that's
take you
clearly,
everywhere.
Who is your
Very
niece,
brave.
we should say.
Yes,
Correct.
she is my niece. Yes.
So Mariah and I were walking up these stairs, kind of like side by side, and we felt something brush against both of us, in between us.
Yeah.
And we kind of figured it was a bat, right?
Yeah. Oh, really? That was that prevalent? That's wild, huh?
Yeah. It kind of freaked us out for a minute.
I know.
I'm like, that's probably a bat, but
really,
we couldn't prove it, that it was or it wasn't. But
the problem, right?
In order for me to explain it, I was like, it could have been a bat.
But they both were standing right next to each other and they felt something. And Jamie, Greg's wife, and I were at the bottom of the stairs and we're like, man, because we didn't feel anything.
Exactly. See, and then it always, in a lot of evidence you collect, comes down to that, where is it going to be scientifically viable? Probably not. When you feel something like that, it's just there's just sometimes there's no way to quantify it, right?
And once again, they didn't give us any equipment. We didn't have any of our own.
Yeah, for sure.
If we would have had like a night vision cameras or something like that, we probably would have seen it. But
exactly. Yeah. And
so Jacob, have you ever felt something like that when you've been out? Have you had an experience?
Been touched?
I've never, it's funny. We talk a lot of times, we talk about how sensitive people can be to the paranormal. And I don't think I've ever felt anything personally. I've never really seen any temperature changes that have been so out of whack that I've been like, I think that's paranormal. You could argue that some of them have been, but I don't think I've personally ever felt anything. I think all the evidence that I've collected on actual ghost hunts have been mostly just audio evidence from the spirit box sessions and from EVP. Well, we haven't really caught any EVPs, but we've recorded some of our spirit box sessions.
So you've never felt anything evil?
I actually made a note in here that I've had what I thought was an interesting paranormal experience, but it wasn't on a hunt. It was just at my house. So I couldn't really put into.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Did you not smudge when you left somewhere? What happened?
I don't know. It was just a very interesting experience. Yeah.
Maybe we should explain smudging, since we've talked about it a couple times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
well, after we went through the Promont house in Milford, when we left, the people who were the paranormal investigators were burning sage and moving it up and down to smudge. So sage is supposed to get rid of spirits around you.
Yeah, I would say burning sage is probably the most common form of smudging. If you guys would agree.
Yeah.
I think that'd probably be the most common one. And then I think the protection prayers a lot of the time and the cleansing prayers are what a lot of people do.
Okay.
But it's very interesting.
Can you find those online?
Oh yeah, you would just Google it. The thing is, a lot of those come down to like specifically what your religion is. So if you were looking for one, I would say whatever you believe. I would say if you're a Catholic, Google Catholic prayers, right? It's just, it's interesting how it comes down to religion like that. But I would Google it per what you believe and figure out kind of before a protection prayer and a cleansing prayer for afterwards would be the
what if you're not religious, Jacob?
Then you probably don't need a protection prayer.
Probably won't pray.
Yeah, right? I would assume that they would probably just not. Yeah, if you have a spiritual belief, I think they have non-religious ones. If you're more of just a spiritual person, but I think if you're one of those guys who just going out there to say, "Oh, ghosts aren't real," they probably don't do the prayers.
If you don't pray, all the evil ones follow you out. That's why you really need to smudge, Greg.
Exactly. I
think didn't you bring the smudge to the Ohio State Reformatory, Karen? Didn't you smudge me in the parking lot?
You don't bring the smudge. You bring the sage that you burn. I like that though. I'm bringing the smudge today.
I think you smudged me in the parking lot.
I did. I smudged you, Mariah, and Jamie in the parking lot. And I live to tell about it. Yes.
After going to the reformatory, you got to.
Right. So speaking of the reformatory, there is one other story that is pretty funny from there. So we didn't feel anything, but it was pitch black. We didn't even have flashlights. So we're using our phones to light and it's 2 stories high. It was dangerous. You could go anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's completely black. So we're at one end of this very long hall. Jamie's sitting there and Greg, I don't know what you were trying to record stuff, I think, but Mariah was way down the hall. We couldn't even see her. And Jamie said that one of the things that they say on the ghost hunting shows is you should talk to the ghosts, which, I didn't know. But so again, Mariah, we can't see her. So Jamie decides she's going to talk to the ghosts. So she says, "If you're here, touch Mariah." And from this very long hallway, we hear this echoing come back, "Rude."
That's
but
hilarious.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
But yes, Mariah will go in any corner. So
she's fearless, I would assume.
Yeah. But yeah, we missed out. We would like to go back there with equipment and try a little harder to find something.
That would be a ton of fun. We should try to make that happen because I have not a bunch of equipment, but enough that we could go in there and everyone would have a piece of equipment.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can go in. I'm sure they charge because it's all about restoration of the place.
I would assume for sure.
They have scheduled tours, that you can go.
That would be fun.
I know, but can you just go in by yourself?
Well, no, it would be like what we did.
It'd be like that.
30 or 40 people, but again, the place is so big.
Yeah, for sure. You could definitely collect some cool stuff, I would assume.
Do you think, you mentioned it briefly, do you think some people are more sensitive to the paranormal than others?
In my experience, that has been the case.
Do you think they're just more open to it, or do you think it's actually
it's
genetic
debated
in some way?
It's kind of debated. So I think it's a commonly held belief in ghost hunting by part of the people who do it that some people are just more sensitive and it's a genetic thing. You can't change it. Some people are more sensitive. A lot of people in the metaphysical world believe that you can open up your psychic abilities more so if you with practice and study. I've never been super sensitive to anything in particular. I've never really gotten the chills during the ghost hunts, but it's kind of interesting where you'll have people who are just, they'll be like, "Wow, do you guys feel the energy change?" And they'll have goosebumps on their arm. And again, it's kind of hard without a control to know, hey, are these guys just nervous? Are they just feeling things? Or are they truly more sensitive than we are, right? But if in my experience, and I don't think my friends have been lying, I trust the people that I ghost hunt with, certain people seem to be more sensitive to at least the physical aspects. If you like,
so they have felt things that you have not.
I would say and feeling is where I would say is more so in that aspect, because there's a lot of evidence like auditory evidence and visual evidence, and I don't think the sensitivity necessarily really applies to. I think it's more so feeling people say the energy changes, right? People feeling those energy changes and feeling the temperature changes more drastically and getting the goosebumps, feeling things brush by them. I've never personally experienced anything like that, but on ghost hunts with my friends, people have. I would assume that there's some level of sensitivity per person, but I'm not really sure if you could train it or not.
You haven't been to the Stanley, have you?
I have. I haven't been on a ghost hunt at the Stanley, but I've been there a couple of times just on the tours of the hotel.
Do people still stay there?
Oh yeah, it's an awesome place to stay the night. Unfortunately, the Stanley went under new management a few years ago. And they used to have an in-house ghost hunting team, and that's where the Stanley Method was created. But the new owners aren't as interested in keeping that aspect. I know it sucks. So they don't have the team anymore. But that was a really cool thing, and you could go meet the people, and they would take you on ghost hunts there. But they don't do it anymore, unfortunately.
Have you spent the night there?
I have actually never gotten the opportunity to, but my parents have. My friends have all stayed there. I've just never, for some reason, I never have actually made it there.
What's your most successful ghost hunt? Was it in St. Elmo?
So when it comes down to like what the most successful ghost hunt I've ever been on, I wrote down and I was thinking about it for a little bit. It's the Pyeth Cemetery in Black Hawk, Colorado. So Black Hawk is a big casino town up in the mountains, but it used to be just an old West town before all the casinos moved in. And it's got a really cool historic district, and we went ghost hunting in one of the cemeteries there. I would consider it the most successful because mostly all we did was SB7 spirit box sessions. And the consistency of getting the same multi-phrase sentences with the same voice multiple times. We had never gotten evidence like that before. We had heard the same voice multiple times, on the SB7 spirit box, going over something ridiculous. Like I think it was over 5 stations. And a lot of these EVPs, just go over 2 or 3 sessions. So 4 or 5 was pretty big. We had never actually gotten that successful of an SB7 spirit box session.
So what did they say?
Do you
remember?
They were random. It was a lot of random phrases. When we were getting them, it was like, because our questions were a lot of, are you buried here? A lot of the phrases were of the essence of by the tree, something like this. Over the hill. We were just getting phrases.
Oh, so they were answering where they were buried there.
Yes, we were getting, and it was hard because it's hard to say that that's what they were doing because it wasn't a specific answer. But we were like, are you here in this cemetery? And then we would get something along the lines of by the tree.
Oh, see, I would.
You know what I mean? And it was just
I wouldn't like it.
And the most interesting one was we got. The one phrase, I believe it was something along the lines, because now, like I said, so Black Hawk is a big casino town now, but beforehand, I want to say that was only started in the early 2000s. That's the cemetery dates back to the 80s. So we were getting a lot
the 80s, like the 1980s.
Yeah.
Way back
Way
there in
back
the
to
1980s.
1980s. Wait a minute. 1880s or 1980s?
I have to double check that.
All right, we're gonna go now, Jacob. You're out.
Well, the reason I say that is
Old cemetery from the 1980s.
Hold up.
We're done here.
I think I might have misquoted that.
Well, while you're looking that up, let me ask you. So you said it went over 4 or 5 different stations or channels or whatever, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you can tell that by the number of words, or how?
So I can actually, I'll even play this for you guys so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. So when you're using these spirit boxes, you'll turn them on and it'll be set at a radio station. I've actually taken the antenna out of mine because it's debated whether you want to leave it in or not, because you get radio interference. So I've taken the antenna out of mine. Some people argue that the radio interference is actually more beneficial to have because they can manipulate the words from the radio interference over. But I prefer to have it without the antenna, just because I think it's less variables. But what you'll do when you're using these spirit boxes here, I'll show you. So you'll set it on, you'll turn it on, and it'll set to one of these radio stations, right? And what I mean when I'm talking about you'll set the setting to sweep through the radio stations. And what I mean is you'll hear it start sweeping, right?
Yeah.
So you'll hear it go, and that's every time it flips through one station, right? And so what I mean when I say over multiple stations is that your voice is going for 3 seconds over these, as it continues to flip through the stations, right?
Gotcha.
Is what I mean by that.
It sounds like the Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
That's what it sounds like.
Exactly. So
That would flip me out, just that.
But yes, we've gotten very weird interferences on these things. And at that cemetery, that was the craziest phrase we got was when they said it was something along the lines of lots of buildings, right? Because there hadn't previously been a lot. And that's kind of what we
so like
equated
they're
it to.
commenting.
Like, wow, what are all these? Because the casinos there are now 20 stories high.
Wow.
So, but those only were built in the early 2000s. So that's kind of what we were equating the information to.
Okay, I have a question that we haven't asked yet, and I don't know if we've gone over it really or not, but do you do anything special to attract the ghosts or the spirits? I guess, what's the proper term? Ghost, spirit?
I think a lot of people say entity and energies.
Okay.
And because the problem with ghosts and spirits is that it's so debated whether people think it's an actual entity or whether it's just energy.
Okay,
there's so many different theories on what people think actual ghosts
Okay, that's
are,
good to know.
Yeah, there's a ton of, some people just think it's manipulation and energy. Some people think it's past live ghosts, typical. Some people think it's religious. There's so many different theories out there.
So entity is a good,
entity, I think, is a good way to put it.
Is there anything you do to attract the entities?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that I wrote down and I think that are interesting to discuss. The first one is something that really you only see the bigger guys with a ton of funding use, and they have these machines that say they increase activity by changing the electromagnetic fields and stuff, and you can pay thousands of dollars to buy this equipment. I haven't done a ton of research on them just because you don't have
$1,000.
You don't have. I'm gonna buy the equipment, so I've never really researched.
You haven't gotten funding from your parents for that yet.
Yeah, exactly. They won't give me the loan for it. So, but the people on like Ghost Adventures use them all the time, and supposedly they have a lot of success with them. But we don't do anything special to attract ghosts.
So you just prepare yourself by opening yourself up and being accepting.
Yeah. I wouldn't personally say there's anything I do to attract spirits. I think that the best way to try to collect evidence would be, again, I think it comes back a lot of the time to just making sure you have multiple nights and multiple experiments that you reproduce each night, right? Do the same experience night in and night out. And that's how you're kind of getting a control and trying to look for what's different in the, kind of trying to find what's being manipulated, right? And I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. But I think some of my friends who are more spiritual about it, I think they would argue that there's ways to open yourself up to it. But I'm not positive. I'm not the most sensitive to it.
Probably because you don't open yourself up to it.
That's probably what it is. Yeah, but it is kind of a lot. Again, a lot of that just comes down to personal belief, I think.
What's the research on why certain ghosts stay in certain places? You know how there'll be a famous ghost in a famous place.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there theories as to why that happens?
There's a lot of commonly believed ways that spirits attach themselves to things. And it's like sometimes they'll attach themselves to an object, whether it's like a box or a doll. Sometimes they'll attach themselves to like houses, and sometimes they'll attach themselves to people. A lot of what is believed is that something traumatic happened and the energy is still in that house. And something about the energy keeps those spirits there. Something is not allowing them to move on. You know what I mean?
Bad?
And I think we'll get into this a little bit later, but so there's a couple different kinds of hauntings, and what a lot of people talk about are when you're talking about something that's trapped, a lot of people are referring to like a residual haunting, which is not necessarily an intelligent spirit. It's more of like an imprint on the location. And when you're talking about stuff like that, you're discussing like footprints, you hear a scream, you hear a conversation on your EVP recorder that doesn't really pertain to anything you were saying, stuff of that essence. And what people are talking about why those are there is a lot of times there's been like trauma, like in an old West building where someone got shot and you can hear the gunshot, right? There's things like that people are discussing as an attachment, but really it's just a residual mark on the building. You know what I mean?
Just like a tape playing over and over and over and over.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you have that, and then you have the attachments, and a lot of attachments are kind of more so, there's like the intelligent attachments where that are equated to, I think it's most commonly people are thinking that attachments are demonic, but an attachment doesn't have to be a negative thing. You know what I mean? You can have
they just love
yeah.
you.
Exactly.
And they want to protect you.
There's guardian angel attachments. There's so many different things that are theorized about.
That's what I have.
And yeah,
a guardian angel. Greg has the evil demon.
Exactly. But I think a lot of like,
as long as he protects me, I'm fine with that.
Exactly. Honestly, you might want the demon. It might be a little stronger. I think like some of the favorite theorized reasons for attachment would be like religious significance a lot of the time, trauma that somehow is keeping them there, and like a really fun theory that I don't think is talked about a lot that people really enjoy is like the tying of water to these spiritual locations. Like a lot of, you'll get along these giant rivers, and then a lot of these locations they'll find natural springs under. There's some really weird theories about ghosts being tied to the energy of water. It's very interesting. It's much more common in ghost hunting than you would really think. It's just very interesting theories.
As well as like limestone too.
Exactly. Limestone is another one that's very, for some reason, there's certain materials that it seems like people theorize that can be imprinted much easier, you know?
So if you're drowned in a river, you're more likely to stay. Is that what you mean? Or ghosts in the area are drawn to the water?
A favorite theory of mine, actually, and I'm not going to be the one saying that this theory is legitimate. I'm very much, I try to be as unbiased on the topic as I possibly can, just because in a lot of these things, there's so much spiritual belief involved that it comes down to individuals, I think, a lot of the time. But a favorite theory of mine is, I'm not sure if it's the Golden Gates Bridge that's right by Alcatraz, that you can see Alcatraz from. But a lot of people, there's a big theory of the suicides off of that bridge and why Alcatraz is so haunted, because it's flowing out to Alcatraz. So things like that, there's a lot of very weird beliefs on how energy and imprints work with water and limestone and different materials.
Interesting. So I have a weird question have you ever used your equipment in your own house, or do you not want to know?
I've tried and I've never gotten anything. So
okay.
I
wouldn't do that. I was just saying, I don't think I would use it because I wouldn't want to know.
Yeah, well, sometimes you wake up in the morning.
I have a pond in my yard. Now I'm all freaked because I've got water. Thanks, Jacob.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so sometimes you wake up with a weird scratch because you scratched yourself overnight, and you're like, well, I think I need to get the ghost hunting equipment out and check this out.
No, I wouldn't do it. Would you do it, Greg? Would you use your equipment in your own house? I
probably would, Karen.
I know he would. He totally would. He wants to meet his demon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, it all comes down to I've never really, on a ghost hunt, I've never personally experienced anything negative. And when you first start, it's kind of such an unknown topic. It can be very intimidating. But now, I've been on a couple of ghost hunts and I've never really been in any negative situations. And I'm not as scared of the situations anymore. Or just
you're not as scared of them.
Yeah, I'm not as scared of the creepy locations as I used to be.
I just wouldn't want to know if there was something in my house.
Yeah, I've always hoped I had like a fun ghost that would do a little more trickster stuff rather than, scary stuff.
No, if I had a ghost, I'd want it to do the dishes or something. I wouldn't want to start cleaning up around here.
I always think having a ghost, a good ghost to have in your house would be like a cat, right? Just doing mischievous stuff.
Knocking shit off counters.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
What it would do.
Stuff, yeah. Moving the paintings so they're not level anymore. Just fun stuff like that was what I would hope for.
So why do you think, I know a lot of kids seem to be open to paranormal experiences.
Yeah.
Is that just because you're naive and more like you've talked about, they just haven't closed themselves off yet?
Yeah. So in a lot of those bigger demonic cases, a lot of it seems to be that it's easier to manipulate children, right? But there's also a lot of people who really believe that children are just more open and more able to connect on the spiritual level because they haven't been through the ringer, I guess, of science and logic and everything that
all that crazy stuff.
Yeah, just stuff that isn't real, I'm just kidding.
That
No, they just haven't been,
ridiculousness. It's not even the demonic stuff. Sometimes it'll be, who are you talking to in the room? And, it's grandma, and
Exactly.
grandma's been dead for, 10 years or something.
I guess, the best way to say that they would be more
whatever.
receptive, right? More receptive because they haven't been told for years and years and years that ghosts aren't real, right? I think would probably be the leading theory on that.
Jacob, earlier you mentioned a residual haunting. What are all the different types of hauntings that one could experience?
So I think the most common types of haunting that you run into and that are widely talked about are poltergeist hauntings, you have demonic hauntings, and then you have residual hauntings. So a poltergeist haunting is essentially just a haunting that interacts with the natural world. That's when you're getting things knocked off the counter. That's when you're getting, the levitation in the
would that be
levitation of the table during that would be a poltergeist
would that be considered an intelligent haunting?
Yes, that would be an intelligent haunting. Okay. So poltergeist and demonic hauntings are both considered intelligent hauntings.
What makes them considered intelligent?
They interact with you. So a residual haunting is essentially just an imprint that isn't really, you're going to hear a scream, but it has no correlation to what you're actually doing. You're actually a poltergeist and a demonic haunting. You're actually interacting with the spirit. So
a residual haunting basically ignores your presence and goes about its business.
It's not intelligently thinking. It's almost like a tape recorder.
Okay.
This is the way we like to talk about it. So the difference between a poltergeist and a demonic haunting is that, a demonic haunting is essentially whatever that entity is has never taken a mortal form. You're essentially speaking of something that isn't of this world. A regular intelligent spirit a lot of times is theorized that it's a ghost of the past or something. A demonic haunting specifically means that this thing has never been to the physical world. And a demonic haunting also implies that it's evil. And the demonic hauntings are where you get the stories of possession and trying to get power and greed and things like that from a lot of the time.
Never been a living person, basically.
Exactly. Not of this world is the way to say it, is I think is the best way. Those you're talking, you're like skinwalkers would be considered demonic. The Exorcist, those would be demonic hauntings.
This is just a kind of crazy question, but why are all entities very old? It doesn't seem like people go into, does it have to do with modern buildings or modern, like there's not limestone or water or something to hold the spirits there? You don't get a lot of highly haunted buildings built way back in the 1980s.
It's interesting. I think a lot of it comes down to the imprints that have been made over the years. I think, it could be a factor of just having the amount of time to have different things happen, right? I mean, if a building was built in the 1700s, it's just had so many more years to have things happen in there or have entities
or does the imprint
or something
gain energy over time? So you see the older ones from then and the newer ones just haven't built up enough energy.
There could be. There's so many different theories, and you never know if grandma died and you see grandma in her house. There's a lot of stories like that, but it's also interesting. You never really hear about a grandma from the 1700s, right? It's always seems to be the spirits that have, I guess, a little bit more power or a little bit more energy with them, right? It's because a lot of the times what they talk about in ghost hunting is takes a lot of energies for these spirits to interact with the natural world is something that you hear a lot of the time. It's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world, right? Maybe having more energy, being able to stick around for the longer periods of time. There's so many.
That's my theory. That's what I'm going with.
I think maybe like I said, maybe grandma just doesn't have as much energy as the
miner from the demon. I went with the miner. Exactly. You went with the demon. But let's just ponder that for a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you say most of your experiences are more the residual or the intelligent, or have you ever had like a demonic
No, I've never seen anything even close to a demonic experience. I would say 90% of what we caught has been residual in the form of footsteps we've heard, in the form of SB7 spirit box sessions that seem to be making intelligent phrases about the area that we're in, not necessarily an intelligent response. You know what I mean?
So not necessarily. So when you said by the tree, they're just kind of saying,
well,
I'm by the tree. They're not answering you directly.
I would say that was the only experience that we've had that was possibly with an intelligent spirit.
Okay. You might ask a question and you might get back, why is it so cold in here?
Exactly. That And I think that's been 90% of our experiences, is just hearing things like when we were in St. Elmo's near the mines, being like, we are up early, something like that, not necessarily pertaining to like, oh, hey, is there anybody here with us? Oh, we're going to the bar tonight. You know what I mean? Stuff like, I think that's been 99% or probably 90% of what we've gotten on the spirit box. And the only time I think we've probably seen something intelligent was at that cemetery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we usually do at the end of our podcast, what have we learned today? And we go over what we learned from the movie. This one, we're not doing that, Greg, because there's way too much that we've learned here today.
That's funny. Perfect. Yeah.
Which is the purpose of this. We're not experts, but we enjoy the topic and we enjoy talking about it. And it kind of pertains, to what we do. We watch the old B movies and, the hauntings and they're not all old B movies. We've watched more modern films. Well, they're still old. They're from the 80s, Greg, 1980s.
Well, Ready or Not wasn't. That was from way back in 2000.
Oh,
I am never going to let him live this down.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I slipped up like that.
Never, ever. He will.
And I looked it up. It has been there since like 1880. So the oldest grave is from 1884 or something like that. But
perfect, yeah. And
it's the newest one is from like it does have like recent graves in it as well. So.
And we were there years ago, so it's just been a while since we've been. But no, I think it's awesome to come on. I'm very happy you guys had me on to come talk, because it's one of those things you just don't think about. The only time you ever see it is the people on TV. But as just a fun hobby on the side that you're doing, you don't have to be an expert to get into it. You just need to know kind of the basics, and it's just a fun thing to think about. And even if you're doing some things right, some things wrong, it's not hard to get out there and get into the field and have an interesting experience, and for a lower cost range, right? It's not like you have to spend $2,000 to get out there and just get in the field and have a good time.
And it's probably exploded in popularity since these shows are on, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And it's funny, you talk to ghost hunters, they're like, oh, you want to be like Ghost Adventures? And they're like, well, they're like the only ones who've made it that far, so it's just a passion project. I mean, it's so much fun. You can go as deep as you want on getting different equipment like thermal cameras and stuff like that, or you could just get an SB7 spirit box, a camera, and a recording device.
So it sounds like you could go out for less than $100.
Oh yeah, if you just get a spirit box and a recording device, you can go out and do sessions. And it's like I said, if you Google where to go in your state, it's really not that hard to find places where you can go and have some quiet time alone and do some cool spirit box sessions in places that are supposedly haunted.
Not alone though.
No, go with friends. You should always go with friends. You should always let people know where you're going to.
I did read somewhere that batteries, and you briefly mentioned it, batteries have been known to be drained in these situations. So you should always have extra batteries.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's probably the most common thing that happens when we're ghost hunting. I would reckon that 80% of our ghost hunts, we've had a battery die.
Okay.
I would say that keeping batteries on you is important. That's a very, we take it as a form of evidence, but
I would too.
Yeah. You're looking for anything you can though. So
I made an SLS camera, Jacob.
Did you make one?
Mm-hmm.
That was something we actually didn't talk about, was like all the cool stuff you can buy if you have the money. But the SLS cams are so cool, man. I really like them. They're kind of controversial, but I really like the SLS cams.
I did use that in my house.
Did you? Did you see anything?
Well, I had a coat hanging on the back of like a bar stool.
Yeah.
And it stalled as a person.
Oh yeah, see,
so
and that's why they get a little controversial, is because people say that they're.
But I did shoot my dog with it, and it didn't find the dog at all.
Really, that's crazy. It's,
all right,
it's
wait. You two geeking out. You have to say what that is and what it's used for.
they're very kind of simple to build. You just have to have like a tablet of some sort. I had an old Microsoft Surface tablet.
Mhm.
Bought I guess it's Microsoft Connect.
Yep. They
that you use on their gamers.
Yeah, they use it on that. So it's the Xbox Connect. It's essentially just a body tracking camera.
Right.
I think is the best way to put it. And you
motion tracking.
Yes, a motion tracking camera. If you're playing like Just Dance, that's what that's what's tracking your movement, right?
Yeah, and then you just connect it to it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and then you look around the room.
Yeah, and sometimes it looks like it'll track a body that isn't there. They're controversial though, because sometimes they will.
There's a little bit of night vision too.
For it. Yeah, a little bit. That's cool. Yeah. That's cool. I really haven't had an experience with one of those things yet. And if it's that simple to build, I might just have to go down the rabbit hole and try to build one.
Yeah, you have to download the software, and I guess the older version is better because that's what I used. Okay.
Can you?
And there is a night vision setting, so you can see
that is cool.
Like night vision too.
For sure.
IR.
You should put the instructions in the show notes, Greg, how to do that. Or at least awesome. Basically, so that people can do that if they want to. No. But don't look in your own house.
Yeah, those things are so cool. I would love to mess with one. Like I said, they're controversial because people say that it's trying to track a body. Right. So like you might see things that aren't there. But man, if you want to talk about the most insane pieces of evidence I've seen on Ghost Adventures or on any of those TV shows, it's been on that SLS camera. It's unreal some of the stuff they've tracked on there and how it's pertained to like the natural world.
Right.
There was one episode, I believe, where they were going through a psych ward, and the SLS camera tracked an entity like hit one of the guys on the show, and without the guy knowing that, he was just like, "Oh my gosh, I have so much pain in my side."
Dude.
And it was like,
oh, are they the dude people?
They're the dude people.
Yeah, exactly. It is those people. But this just that what they've caught on the SLS cam has been some of, I think, the best ghost hunting evidence I've ever seen. It's unreal.
Okay, awesome. Well, so Jacob, you'll have to come out here and we'll have to go up to the reformatory, because between you and Greg and Mariah's adventuring skills, we can definitely cover that place and see if we can find anything. That would be awesome.
I would be happy to plan a trip out there to go do that.
And there must be other places around we could go too.
Oh, I'm sure. There's so many haunted places in every state. It's surprising how easy it is to find a place to ghost hunt when go online.
And there are a lot of paranormal societies too. If you search those up, you can join those too.
Exactly. And
if you want to learn more.
Such great sources of information.
So Jacob, you said your most successful was probably at that cemetery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outdoors, right?
Yeah.
So I
hope so.
I would think that there would be a greater risk of I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Contamination.
Yes, from outdoors.
For sure. So and that's again the most at that.
What do you
cemetery,
mean? Wait, what do you mean? From what?
Like wind and just
what? Yeah, a dog barking in the distance, a car, a light.
But that's not going to sound like over by the tree, right?
No, I get you. So and that's, I think, the best form of evidence we got at that night was through the spirit box, specifically because that it's definitely way more difficult to use your like recording devices outdoors because of that variance that you might run into. But like with the spirit box, since it's coming through an actual speaker, that was most of the evidence that we were discussing, or that I was thinking of when it comes to that hunt.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's like I said, that's the only intelligent response we've ever gotten, and we didn't even get any EVP recordings that night because it was the same thing being outdoors. There's just so much contamination with noise and stuff.
Right.
Well, yeah, and weather, I would imagine.
Oh
so
yeah,
you probably have to have no wind, no rain, no.
Yeah. Or if you're in downtown, you don't want kids knocking on the windows. You
right.
Never know.
Well, even pollen, I would imagine pollen could make orbs, and dust can make orbs and all that.
Especially with the orbs, again, you have to take with a grain of salt. When you're looking for an orb, you're looking for like a weird pattern of movement, right? Because sometimes, man, dust can look like orbs, and if it's just dust flying through, as as much as you might think it's an orb, if it doesn't have a strange pattern of movement that just doesn't seem like
a deliberate pattern.
Exactly. If it doesn't have a deliberate pattern, you could, no matter how much it looks like an orb, you just have to be like, well, it's probably dust, because it's not. There's just, unfortunately, sometimes you catch what you think. 99% sure it's an orb, but it's just like you can't say it's an orb. It would be so much fun to get out there and go to that reformatory, though.
Yeah, it was fun. I want to go back with equipment, because like I said, we had nothing.
No, for sure.
We were downloading apps on our phones that were crap.
Oh, terrible. They were terrible.
I know. We've all been there. We've all tried.
I turned a corner and with an app, and I said, "This damn thing better be fake," because there was this woo up in the corner, and I was like, "Holy crap!"
That's funny. But I would love to see a shadow or something of that with my own eyes. That's one of my goals in life, but I've never been able to find something like that, unfortunately, yet. But one of these days, just takes time, I think, and repetition.
Yep.
Yeah, when I come out there, hopefully I'll bring my spirit box and my EVP recording devices. Hopefully I can get a hold of my friend Kristen and tell her I need the camera.
So before we go, I just want to say a couple of things. And one, in this topic, for sure, you want to make sure if you do go ghost hunting, don't go alone. That we want to emphasize that, and also let someone know where you are, and bring extra batteries, because you never know what could happen there. Is there anything else, Jacob? And smudge, because even if you don't see anything or hear anything, you don't want those spirits or entities following you home.
It's always better safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
I would say the only other thing I would bring up when it comes to what not to do on the ghost hunting is, it's kind of one of those controversial things, but you'll see a lot of these guys on the TV shows that love to antagonize the spirits and be like, well, you're a wimp because you're not going to talk to me, or something along those lines. And that's very controversial in ghost hunting, but if you're a beginner, I would just kind of recommend against the more antagonistic approach. I think more likely the best approach to ghost hunting is probably just same experiments multiple times over a couple of days, trying to be as respectful, just asking questions and trying to get document evidence. I think the whole antagonistic thing is kind of
I think you used the right word. I think respectful, even just of your surroundings, of people letting you into the building, being respectful of the place you're in and any entity that might be in it. Yeah,
exactly. And then also the one last thing is, like, ghost hunting can bring you to some very weird spots, like abandoned buildings and mines in the middle of the forest and stuff of that essence. And just making sure that you're doing it in a safe way, that you're looking at the areas you're going to, not doing anything that your mother wouldn't do when it comes to going to bad areas,
I'm going to guess that perhaps you've gone a few places your mother wouldn't go, but I'm just kidding. But I agree.
Might have heard of somebody.
People talk, you hear things.
You hear things of people doing that. But I'd just say making sure you're in safe areas on the non-paranormal front is a very good thing to do as well. Making sure there's no one in the building that you're going into, or you're not walking into a mine that hasn't been looked at structurally in 80 years or something like that. Just
absolutely. And even just being respectful of where you're walking and what you're walking on. And, even as a photographer, you don't want to be traipsing through these rare wildflowers to get to somewhere. You need to follow the rules, people.
Exactly.
Basically.
Just a lot of common sense and a lot of just being a respectful and responsible person in the field is it can go just going the extra mile like that means a lot to the people who are letting you ghost hunt, to safety, and just all of those aspects of having a good time.
But definitely share what you find, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Wouldn't you?
Oh yeah. It's nothing. If you catch evidence, it's just, and that's something we obviously as amateur ghost hunters have not done the best. There's no reason not to share what you find. No matter what you put out there.
Share the love, right? Yeah. Share the love.
No matter what, some people are going to tell you that they think it's right, and some people are going to tell you they don't think it exists. But putting it out there just for everyone to see when you collect evidence is just never a bad thing.
I agree. Greg, anything?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Perfect.
Well, first, Karen, of course, we need to thank Jacob for coming on and enlightening us on ghost hunting.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Jacob.
It was my pleasure, and I'm very happy to be on the podcast.
Yeah, tell all your friends.
Yeah, tell your friends.
Oh, I will. I'll make sure. I'll make sure they all hear. They're all going to hear that I was on a podcast. So
You were
I'm very
awesome. We really, really do appreciate it. Like I said, he's on our very first podcast of Wicked Ramblings. And so we're not all sure what we're doing here, but he was amazing.
Any time to come on and discuss ghosts or the paranormal, I'm happy to. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
So thank you for joining us for our inaugural episode of Wicked Ramblings.
Remember, we're not experts, and this podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
Yes.
Thanks so much for listening. Want to keep in touch? Check out our website, scaryspirits.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Scary Spirits Podcast. Find us on YouTube at Scary Spirits Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at info@scaryspirits.com. To help us grow the podcast, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We really do appreciate your support. And as always, please drink responsibly.